Tatum Engineering is a full-service consulting engineering firm at the forefront of innovative sustainable design and building science, providing integrated system design and energy solutions for new and existing buildings. From early planning through project completion, Tatum supports project teams with services including embodied carbon analysis, feasibility studies, energy modeling, and energy studies, helping building owners chart a path toward the future. Since 1989, Tatum has maintained its commitment to mission-driven engineering as embodied in its name. Technology as if the Earth mattered. Learn more at tatum.com. That's TAITEF.com, a sponsor of the Mysterious Chirp.
Bienvenidos, Terrans. Welcome aboard the Mysterious Chirp. This is Raven. Buckle up. It's about to get exciting.
Greetings, Terrans, and happy 4th of July. Welcome to our first Between the Seasons episode, an interview with the brilliant, funny mystery writer, Mindy Quigley. Woo!
Woo! Hi, Holly.
Hi, Mindy. I love that your tagline is, sometimes murder is a laughing matter. And by the way, everybody, that's Mindy's dog. It's
Yes, sorry.
MindyQuigley.com, MindyQuigley.com. Needless to say, I adore Mindy, especially because murder can sometimes be a laughing matter, and we have a lot in common. Mindy! Woo! I'm going to say a quick thing about your bio. Mindy Quigley is the author of 2 lighthearted mystery series. Her latest, The Deep Dish Mysteries, Minotaur-St. Martin's Press, was a Women's World Book Club pick, has been featured in Parade, Milwaukee Magazine, and the Seattle Times. And here's one of the extra cool things about Mindy. Mindy's non-writing career is stranger than fiction, having taken her from the U.S. to the U.K., where she worked as the personal assistant to the scientist, y'all know we love scientists, who cloned Dolly the sheep. And also she worked as a project manager for a research clinic founded by the author J.K. Rowling. And I don't know if you're still doing this, but you were working with an incredible organization fairly recently that was focusing on understanding more about and curing brain tumors in dogs. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah. So I work very part-time as a clinical research coordinator for the vet school at Virginia Tech. And one of the grants that I work on is a brain cancer research grant.
It's amazing. You're amazing.
Oh, thanks, Holly. The feeling is mutual.
So I think first let's talk about your most recent mystery series and how you mix delightfulness and really incredible characters. Like, seriously, any of these characters could have their own little spin-off series. That's how amazing these characters are, in my humble opinion. And I'm enjoying us doing that for some of our Between the Seasons episodes. We're following some of the characters on their own one-off. And so that's how where that thought came from for me. I was like, oh, I would love to know this one-off thing for Daniel, this one-off thing for Delilah, and so on and so forth. So for our captivated listening audience, could you wax poetic or full of swears if you want, but they have to be PG swears, because as you know, we use Scots whales and ambergris in the series. Mindy and I share a love of swearing.
We do. Yeah. So these books are in the cozy mystery vein. So this is mysteries that don't have a lot of swearing, even though I love to swear in real life. But they're the sort of like Hallmarky style mysteries. But one thing I tried to do when I set out to create the Deep Dish Mysteries was to make sure exactly what you're saying, that each of the characters was a fully realized person. And part of that is kind of utilitarian, because I wanted to make sure, like, I knew this was going to be a series, and I wanted to make sure that we had the major sleuthing bases covered, because, when you have a series, like, a lot of times you're going to run into a time where you need a computer password cracked, or you need somebody who's athletic to do a thing. So I wanted to make sure that within that cast of characters, I had all of those people. So I gave, my kind of second banana character, Delilah's best friend, this backstory that even though she's a chef, everybody else in her family is a lawyer. And they're sort of famous kind of shystery lawyers, the kind that have like billboards where they're like, call me if you're in a truck accident and that kind of thing. So her family is always on call if there's a legal question. And obviously Sonia knows a lot about the law, having grown up around that. So part of that, like I said, is just a choice that I made early on to make sure that there were people, expertise within the team that could help solve mysteries. But then following on from that, the people just started to talk to me. And I'm sure this is true too of you and other actors, that, once you get into it, then you find that you can access those people somewhere in your own psyche, and they take on a little bit of a life of their own, to the extent that I will be writing a scene that I've carefully plotted, and all of a sudden I'm like, nope, that's not what they want to do. They want to do this other thing. So let's just follow that.
I love that. Reveal. I have had the unbelievable joy and honor to have narrated the books in this deep dish pizza mystery. And I'm excited to be, I can't wait to see the manuscript for the next one, book 5, At Death's Door. I've absolutely loved all the other ones. And TBH, I loved narrating the first 2 books of that early mystery, like 10,000 years ago.
Yes. Yeah. Holly and I have known each other forever. I think for over 10 years we have. So, and I apologize for my dog. I don't know why my dog is being such an idiot, but he is. He's a yappy little 10-pound puppy, and he just has decided that now would be a great time to start barking. So that's what's happening in my house.
No worries. So as we were saying, we've known each other forever. A Murder in Mount Moriah and A Death in Duck were my first introductions to Mindy's wonderful, delicious brain. One of the other things, obviously listeners of the Mysterious Chirp will know that there are official people who are inspectors and sergeants and solve the crime. And then we have the amateur sleuths, the Scoobies, who doesn't call them the Scoobies?
Yes.
So one of the things I have always loved about your world is that it's so inspirational to me how you have the Scoobies intersect with the official people. Like, I really believe it. And because there's sometimes I'm reading something and I'm like, I kind of don't buy this at all, or it's like the official people are stupid, which I also sometimes find discomforting. I'm like, no, these people are hardworking in real life. And one of the beautiful, beautiful things about all your work is that we don't see that, right? It's not that, oh, these people are stupid, or, oh, they can't get along, or, oh, this improbable thing happens and somehow this amateur person is better. It's not that at all. And yet somehow you still manage to have the Scoobies and the officials coming at it from both sides. So we get to, as a reader, listener, consumer, identify with the Scoobies and help us, which is a lifeline to us following the mystery. But you're not doing that at the expense of the official people. And I worship you for that.
Well, thank you. Part of that comes from living in a small town. So I live in this town that's, well, it's not small, but it's like 40,000 people, but it's a college town. So more than half of those people are students who only live here part of the year. And I am friends with our retired chief of police who stepped down a couple of years ago. And when I get ready to write each book, or usually somewhere like partway through writing, I'll sit down with him. We have like an annual meeting where we sit down and we talk about all of the policing that takes place in the books. And I run things past him and, sort of like, as the chief of a small town police department, how would you be approaching this? What would you do in this situation? Does this seem plausible? And he's great because he knows he knows the kind of mystery that this is. This is not a police procedural, and that level of detail and authenticity are not what my readers are interested in. They're interested in the personal stories and the characters. So there are things where he's like, maybe, or like you could make it more plausible by doing X, Y, or Z thing. But he's not somebody who gets caught up in like the nitty gritty of things that, I'm like, could they turn this autopsy result around this quickly? And he's like, under perfect circumstances, if you asked pretty please, maybe, so that's really helpful for me because I think that kind of massages things in a way that gives it that level of realism. And even just interacting with him, honestly, I've picked up a few things that have made their way into my detective character, because I've just noticed like how he is. We'll be in a coffee shop and he's always sitting with his back to the wall where he can see the entrances. It's a very cop thing to do. And when we were out just actually a couple of weeks ago, there was a loud bang, it was a cart that like kind of fell off the back of a truck. And the way that he reacted to that, you could just see like it was just this inbuilt response where he was immediately like, what is that sound? What is my response going to be? In a way, it wasn't like a startle reflex. It was this like action reflex that certainly I didn't have and nobody else that was sitting near us had, but he had this. So those are the kinds of things that having become friends with him and kind of seeing how the police operate at that closer level, because this is such a small town, I know I interact with, our mayor and things like that a lot more than I think a lot of people would. It allows me, I think, to want to be realistic and also want to present those characters in that kind of like good, hardworking light that you talked about. Like these are dedicated civil servants for the most part. And, talk a little bit about some of the less nice sides of policing too. We talk about that a little bit to the extent possible within the cozy mystery genre, but allude to, flaws in the criminal justice system and the way that justice in a moral sense is different than justice in a legal sense sometimes.
I love that. And speaking of your characters, let's hear, I think the audience would love to hear more about the characters and the mysteries themselves, because there are so many stinking parallels, and that's partly because of the things that we have in common. You know what I mean? Actually, it's entirely, our respect for these characters and our interest in these characters. And I think people who like the mystery aspect of the Mysterious Chirp will enjoy your mysteries because of your dedication to more probableness and character integrity.
So the deep dish mysteries center on this hard-charging perfectionist pizza chef. And part of that, that's a cliche, right? That chefs are perfectionists, but it's a cliche for a reason. It's one of those things that's true. And I thought, like, let's explore this. Let's explore how she feels about this and how this impacts other aspects of her life. So Delilah O'Leary is this workaholic chef who moves from Chicago up to this resort town in Wisconsin to open her own Chicago-themed deep dish pizzeria. And at her side is her longtime best friend, Sonia Doctor. She's the one who's got the family of lawyers. And Sonia is much more, creative, kind of follow her heart type of person, not as caught up in that level of detail. She would never want to run her own business. She would find it way too stressful. And then we also have our detective, who is Calvin Capone. He's the great-grandson of Al Capone. And that was kind of a thing I threw in there. I remember talking to my agent early on, and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably, if I'm going to do like pizza, I'm going to double down on the Chicago aspect. And that's probably going to mean like bringing in the things that are, that people think of when they think of Chicago. And obviously Al Capone and that old school mob, golden age of mobsters is something that people think of. So I threw that in a little bit as an afterthought as his backstory, but it's really become central to who he is as a person, because I thought, God, can you imagine having that notorious forebear, and in Al Capone's own family for a long time, they changed their name. So for decades, his son went by the last name Brown, and other members of the family changed their names. And only now, almost 100 years after his heyday, are they changing their names back to Capone, because now it's kind of fashionable again, and not as much of an albatross, around their necks. So that's something that I've explored in the books through that character. And then, there's a bunch of side characters, and one that has become a reader favorite that's yet another lens into the criminal justice system is this character Rabbit, who is a person who was formerly incarcerated. So he comes in. Delilah doesn't really want to hire him for various reasons, mostly money, because she has a cash flow problem at the time that he shows up. And she ends up hiring him. And the way that the background that he has, experiencing the criminal justice system from the totally opposite side of what mysteries usually explore, especially cozy mysteries, are usually not interested in the experiences of somebody who's been incarcerated. And that's allowed me to do some really interesting things. In the book I'm working on now, which is book 6 in the series, those experiences that Rabbit had while he was incarcerated are going to become kind of central to the plot and help to solve the mystery. So all of those things are always kind of churning. That's the undercurrent of what's otherwise like a really fun, funny, feel-good, escapist mystery.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And that, I think, is another reason why I adore your work so much, is that, sure, it's delicious to consume, like a cookie, sweet and yummy and fun, but we've snuck a lot of social nutrition in there. Ooh.
I honestly wouldn't want to write these unless I was able to do that. And that's something my editor has been pretty supportive of. And it's not that I ever want to be heavy-handed or shove my views down somebody's throat. It's truly just like, here's a person, like here's a fully realized to the extent possible person, and I just want you to walk a mile in their shoes, and I want to walk a mile in their shoes, and let's just see how that changes our experience of the world, because I really feel like art is one of the most effective ways to cultivate empathy in society. Just seeing somebody who you invite into your living room, either on the page or through a screen, and being like, wow, okay, that I never thought what life would be like if I were, if I identified that way, or if I had that life experience, if that were my financial situation, or if I were faced with that choice. And I think that we could certainly use a lot more empathy in society right now.
Yeah. And along those lines, personally, I appreciate that Rabbit, the person who was incarcerated, and that's his nickname, by the way. That's not his given name.
His name is Robert.
I appreciate that he's a white guy.
Yeah, so we've got our police detective, Calvin Capone, who's biracial, and his mom is Afro-Caribbean. And then we've got Rabbit as a white guy. And that was something I wanted to play with a little bit too. Just like, again, these are like people that exist in the world, and part of what shapes them is their race, and where they come from. And that plays out in different ways.
And I also really appreciate why, for example, Daniel ends up in Wisconsin, or should I make sure I say this correctly? Wisconsin, and Melody, just like all the characters are so fully realized, and I believe that the girl who is straight off the farm would fall for the former Navy SEAL, right? Navy SEAL or Marine?
Army, yeah.
Army,
but,
okay.
Yes, so the ex-soldier. Yeah, so he's definitely, and that's something that I've been interested to. There's a relationship between some of the side characters, as Holly mentioned. Melody is this Wisconsin farm girl. She doesn't have a ton of experience.
In
And
anything.
yeah, and
Except army.
Daniel is originally from Puerto Rico, but he served in the army, so he's lived in various places all over the world and just much more worldly. And he's the handsome bartender now at the restaurant in the books. And Melody crushes pretty hard on him, and I've kind of like wanted to develop that relationship very slowly because I felt like it would not be realistic. You know, Daniel is a nice guy. He doesn't want to take advantage of this naive farm girl, but she just proves herself time after time to be so much more than that. And, you know, many times is instrumental in solving the mystery or saving the day in some crucial and unexpected way that just proves. And again, this comes from her skills on the farm, that she's good mechanically and with machinery. She knows quite a bit about animals. She just has a lot of like practical knowledge. And she's also got this artistic streak too, that we see play out in various ways that again, kind of save the day. So she's somebody that I think there's more to than meets the eye. And it's fun to see that play out in the romance, you know, the little like backstory romance that's going on, as well as in the main mystery plot in each of the books.
Well, it's appreciated. I totally, when I'm narrating your books, appreciate the dedication to the fullness of characters. And when I'm enjoying your books just as a reader, as a consumer, I appreciate all of that. It's much easier for me when I have real live people to sculpt around, and their ideas, you know, and I can just like orient things towards how I know, but you have to have all of that cast in your brain. And it's so, I just wanted to shout out about that because you're so brilliant. Where does your love of mysteries come from?
Well, I'm one of those kids. I mean, it's such a cliche, but I was one of those kids who was like Nancy Drew and all of the, you know, mystery books when I was little. And I remember like the first ever picture book that I really remember was Nate the Great, and he's a little kid detective. And the mystery is really fun. It plays out in the artwork as well as through the words, but the artwork in this picture book, you know, you can use it to solve the mystery if you're eagle-eyed. So I wish I had a deeper answer than that. And I guess maybe I do a little bit, that I also am somebody who wishes that the world was fairer and more just, and creating stories where you get to control that definitely gives me a little bit of power, you know, in a world where sometimes you feel like you can't control those things. So maybe that's my deeper answer, but I'm also just a person who's always loved, I remember, you know, like Agatha Christie, probably from age 10, I was reading those classic Agatha Christie books.
Totally. Yeah, I'm a mystery. And are you reading a favorite mystery right now? I am constantly reading books, mostly sci-fi and mystery, and it's more mystery than sci-fi, but I love sci-fi mysteries also. But I'm usually reading like 5 things at the same time, in addition to reading for work. It's just a thing. So what are you reading at the moment?
Well, I have a couple of favorites. So right now, my son and I are listening on audiobook to this. It's the Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries. So it's a Victorian set mystery. It's a Victorian England. It's a little girl who solves mysteries. She's maybe 12. But the writing of these books, it's just outstanding. They're like, they could be literary fiction, and I love everything about them. You know, talk about characterization. Like, these things are, every adult who loves mysteries, especially those golden age mysteries, should be reading the Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries by Elizabeth Bunce. They're phenomenal. And I'm sad. I think there are only 5 of them, and I'm going to go back and start again when I finish because they're so good. And then I am also eagerly anticipating. So last year, one of my favorite books was this book, Glory Be by Danielle Arsenault. And this centers on Glory Broussard, who lives in Louisiana, and she's a Black woman who really is just such an interesting character, both in her personality and her morality. So she's like running a sports book at the same time as like the church services are happening. But then she's also like a very committed church lady in these other ways, mostly to get kind of get one over on some of her fellow church ladies who she feels like have wronged her. But even given those, maybe less than perfect, less than likable characteristics, you cannot help but root for this woman. She's so tough. She has such an interesting voice. I was captivated from the first page, and the sequel to that, Glory Days, just came out a couple months ago. So that is the next book on my TBR. It's a really fun setting, and again, like just the voice of the narration, you cannot help but root for this really funny, tough woman who sometimes is her own worst enemy.
Sounds amazing. Super quick before we talk sci-fi, do you have a favorite Sherlock Holmes writer spinoff?
Ooh,
I have to say, I have a bunch of favorites, but my two favorites at the moment are Laurie R. King's books.
Is that The Beekeeper's Apprentice?
Yeah, that's the first
so
one.
good,
Yep.
so good. Yes.
And I also love Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's take on it. Oh my
Wait, what?
God.
I was not aware of this.
Yes,
I must go
there
and get this
are.
immediately.
He's written 3, and they are marvelous. And they start with backstory. So the very first book is about Mycroft as a young man, and it is brilliant.
Oh my gosh, I have to
Highly
check it out because I love him as an essayist. I've never read any of his fiction. I actually didn't even know that he wrote fiction. So the fact that he's doing mysteries, just like I am delighted by that because he is a delightful writer and a delightful human being from what I can tell. So yeah, I'm super excited about that. So I'd say like my spin-off of recent years that I've really loved is the BBC Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, just because I love the characterization of Dr. Watson in that as just a little bit more of an active character. He's always this blank slate, essentially. He's kind of, and they play with that a little bit in the Laurie R. King series, like what a numpty he is in a lot of senses, that the female sleuth in those Laurie R. King books certainly does not think highly of Dr. Watson, but I do. And I love that they made a little bit more of him in that BBC series.
Yeah, me too. Me too. All right, sci-fi. I know that you have some passions for sci-fi, and I could just eat sci-fi all day, as long as it's really good sci-fi. I just finished, I'm not sure how you say it, but it's Imago by Octavia Butler. So that was delicious. It was amazing. It was brilliant. Anyway.
I am a mostly television sci-fi consumer, so I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but I watch a fair bit of sci-fi, especially when I was younger. I was a nut about Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that was probably my entry point into sci-fi. And then my kids and I still really love Doctor Who, so that's kind of the ongoing sci-fi love in my life. But I still love the old Next Generation with Captain Picard, and I'd say that's my major sci-fi that still exists in my life is through Doctor Who and The Next Generation.
I love all the Star Treks, all of them, and am happily awaiting the next season of I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one with Pike. It's
I have not seen that one.
wonderful.
Okay.
Oh, it's so good. And I'm currently rewatching Ahsoka, because I'm also heavily in love with all things Star Wars. So all things Star Trek, all things Star Wars, but also I consumed Battlestar Galactica when it was around, and Doctor Who, and I would say even Hitchhikers is sci-fi.
Oh yeah,
and, like I said, Octavia Butler's work, and television-wise too. Like there's so many things that are sci-fi right now. I can't watch all of The Last of Us, but my husband watches it, and what I can watch is brilliant. But it's a little too all the babies and all the dogs are dying. And, you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yeah. And, and right
that
now, like a
worked for me.
dystopia might not be what a lot of us are wanting to invite into our lives,
Yeah.
more dystopia. So I do love a good dystopian, especially like the classic dystopian short stories and novels. But yeah, just right now, that's not, I don't have space for that.
What if there was you had a favorite sci-fi moment? If you were on a spaceship and you can combine that with anything that you've read, what would be your favorite thing that would have happened?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have a few. I mean, this is not one that I would ever want to experience in real life, but I refer to all the time the Weeping Angels episode of Doctor Who. It's the scariest hour of television I have ever experienced. And I don't know exactly why that is, because it's not like objectively, if you're like a horror watcher, it is not that scary. But there was something just like existentially terrifying. And there are a ton of jump scares in this episode. And it's about these aliens who look like angel statues. And if you don't look at them, they grab you. So you have to keep your eyes on them open without blinking in order to save yourself. And that was just kind of like peak Doctor Who for me. It was such a scary episode. But in terms of like episodes that I think about a lot, I had to look it up just now, but there's an episode of The Next Generation called The Measure of a Man. I couldn't remember what it was called, but it's about Data, the android, is being compelled by Starfleet essentially to like be disassembled and have his memories, his software uploaded to create clones of himself. And having worked in the space of cloning, as the assistant to the guy who cloned Dolly the sheep, it's something I've thought about a lot, the ethics of genetic manipulation and what makes the self the self. And that episode is really great for distilling a lot of those debates about, consciousness, like what makes you an individual. And now, there are a lot of interesting real science things happening about, people who were considered to be in persistent vegetative states, for example, but can still think. So are you alive if you have that like minimally conscious state? And AI, obviously, just within the last couple of years, this episode prefigured these debates that we're having now by a good 2 decades, about what is dangerous about AI, what it could be helpful about AI, when does AI become human-like, and why does that freak us out so much? And then even, frankly, slavery. And this comes up in the discussions about cloning, too, that, if you cloned yourself, how much are you allowed to manipulate the genes of your offspring before that becomes damaging, like you're infringing on their personhood and their ability to exist as a unique individual. So all of those things, I make it sound like it's actually like a really fun episode too, very interesting. And it's almost like an episode of Law and Order because it's this trial. But I think that just encapsulates everything that's cool about sci-fi.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes. And it's all the things that you and I are both dedicated to, all of those thoughts. And I totally agree with you. Sci-fi is where we can, I wrote about this in a blog. It's like, how can we talk about things that are really important social issues without people stopping the read? And sci-fi is the answer, because if you put it in a different world, in a different context, on another planet,
So do you maybe know this backstory, but I learned this recently that Rod Serling, who created The Twilight Zone, which is another great classic sci-fi that has been very durable with new reincarnations, but his initial plan, so this is like well before he thought of The Twilight Zone, he wrote a screenplay about the murder of Emmett Till, so the brutal lynching of this young boy in the South, and he wrote the screenplay. Nobody would produce it. It would not, no TV station would touch it with a 10-foot pole. Finally, like he rewrote it and a network took it, but they changed almost everything about it. Like they made it I can't remember. They made it about like a Jewish peddler in Texas or something. Like it was like a totally different thing. And almost none of what he wanted to put in there ended up in there. And he was like, right, okay, like how am I going to explore some of these issues that are so important to me? And the answer was the Twilight Zone. I'm going to put it, 500 years in the future. I'm going to make it with aliens or monsters. And we're going to get at these things. We're still going to tell these stories, but in ways that people find more palatable and that are going to be able to be produced in this climate of social injustice, where somebody's worried about, the Southern viewer or whatever at that time. And I loved that backstory of the Twilight Zone that was explicitly, that was not just an offshoot of what he was trying to do. That was explicitly what he was trying to do. And it grew out of his desire to, share his horror, frankly, at what happened to Emmett Till.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, wild story.
Well, I really appreciate, again, even more about you. And is there anything that you want to say or add or whatever before we wrap up? I try to keep these episodes under 40 minutes. So,
I just want to gush over Holly because you're not only an incredible audiobook narrator and actor, but an amazing human being. And it has been my absolute delight getting to know you better, both as an artist and as a human being over the last dozen or so years. And long may our partnership continue.
Yay. Thank you so much. And listeners, the next episode of Between the Seasons will be The Child, which is a character follow of Lieutenant Luke Cannon on a different planet and in a different adventure. So thanks everybody for listening, and thank you, Mindy Quigley. Again, Mindy Quigley. That's last name is spelled QUIGLEY.com. Get her books, get her audiobooks. She is absolutely brilliant and a delicious, delicious read.
Thanks, Holly.
Yay. Mindy Quigley's Deep Dish Mystery Series starts with 6 Feet Deep Dish, then Ashes to Ashes, Crust to Crust, Public Anchovy Number 1, Sleep in Heavenly Pizza, and the upcoming At Death's Door. A perfect listen when you're in the kitchen. The Blacksburg Interfaith Food Pantry is a nonprofit near and dear to this month's guest, author Mindy Quigley. Serving qualified residents of Blacksburg and McCoy, Virginia, the Blacksburg Interfaith Food Pantry is a joint ministry of over 25 faith-based communities in Blacksburg. We are also supported by individuals, organizations, and clubs that are members of our community. A program of New River Community Action Incorporated, the Blacksburg Interfaith Food Pantry is an all-volunteer organization open 4 days a week. We rely solely on cash and food donations from churches, individuals, and other organizations. To donate food or make a cash contribution, please visit the Make a Donation tab on our website, blacksburginterfaithfoodpantry.org. We appreciate the overwhelming generosity which provides us with the ability to serve the increasing needs of the Blacksburg and McCoy communities. For more information, email bburgifp@gmail.com. Thank you. Danita, what's that note from our sponsor, Stratton Creek Inn?
Mystery lovers, join us at Stratton Creek Inn for 2 unforgettable, live, interactive murder mystery events. First up, Who Did It Through the Decades on August 23rd. 4 decades, 1 crime, and only your detective skills can solve it. Then on October 4th, dive into a magical world for a wizarding murder mystery, costumes encouraged. Learn more at strattoncreekin.com.
If you enjoy the Mysterious Chirp, you might also like Ghost Inspectors and 3 Black Halflings.